I couldn't either. And if it,
Thank you, Louis, for allowing us to come up here and having a chance to speak. I know many of you. I am Sam Rauch. I am the deputy. I've always been the deputy director of Fishery Service for regulatory programs, at least for the last 8 years or so. But for 2 years, I've been going through this difficult position where I held 2 jobs, and I'm very glad that I don't hold those anymore. I am extremely pleased to be able to introduce the new director of the National Fisheries Service, the Assistant Administrator, Eileen Sobak. She has a long history. She actually started with NOAA. She worked at the Justice Department, where she was, ironically, my first boss over there, and she stayed there after I left to come over here. She did a brief detour with Interior, and we'll forgive her for that. But she's here now, and she's very pleased. I think, well, you can tell her what you want. But we were pleased that this opportunity arose to have an opportunity to get together to talk with this, because our relationships with the states are very important, and we want to make sure that conversation continues. Eileen.
Great. Thank you very much, Sam. And it was great to be here, Louis and Bob. And I'm not going to speak very long. I'm here to listen and participate. And I do think it's ironic that I gave Sam his first job, and now I'm doing the job that I'm learning the job that he's been doing for the last 2 years. And it just proves that what goes around comes around. But I have been involved in fisheries and natural resource issues in one form or another for a long time. I am a recovering lawyer, just like Sam. I try not to be a lawyer anymore. I've learned my lesson, that doesn't, litigation and legal interpretations aren't really necessarily the best way to solutions. I know that I'm not supposed to mention my time at Interior, that's not very popular, but you know what? Interior is actually, in a lot of realms, very good at partnerships and recognizes the importance of states, and has a lot of both regulatory and non-regulatory programs that involve partnerships, and I learned actually a lot there about the value of working with state and regional entities in solving common resource issues. So this is sort of day 8 into the job, and I'm humbly learning how much I don't know. I'm trying to remember that even things that I used to know something about 20 years ago have really changed a lot, and so every day, again, I learn more and more about how little I do know and how much I have to learn. And one of the great things is that Sam and his team have made a priority for me to get out and meet people. And rather than hearing your issues framed by the great NOAA fisheries staff, I get to hear them from you guys, and I've had a couple of meetings already from a variety of stakeholders, and being able to sit in on one of your meetings and participate in this part of the program is going to be really, really valuable. So, at the break, you can ask me anything you want. At this point, I have no answers to anything. I'm only collecting questions, and I just wanted to say, to really say thank you to Sam. I've heard nothing but great things about his leadership. I'm really happy that he's not moving on somewhere else, that he's actually going back to what seems like the job he would prefer to do. It's making me extremely nervous how happy he is that I'm here. I feel like I have a great team in place. I don't have a personal agenda. My job is to carry forward the mission of the agency and try to, accomplish the goals that I think that we all share. So that's enough. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being here, but we did think we were going to get some resolution on sturgeon and striped bass in the EEZ. No?
Sure.
Sure. Okay.
Let me check with the lawyers and get back to you.
No, that's not fair. Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Eileen. We appreciate you taking on this big responsibility. I would be remiss if I did not congratulate and thank Sam for 2 hard years. And I tease him every time he comes back, or come back, he always has a new title. And I think maybe they're going to allow you to have permanent ink on this card for maybe 6 months or a year. But Sam, you've done an outstanding job, and I think you've been very open to the public. I know your blog or your piece in Commercial Fishing News, for those people that get that document, have been very timely and upbeat, and you've driven the system. And I think even without leadership at the top, where you took over what you had to do and made things happen, you're to be commended for a great job. So you've got a great staff man there, Eileen. We hope he doesn't go away for a while.
Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd just like to echo what Pat said. Eileen, welcome. We are thrilled that you are here. No easy answers anymore. Doesn't appear to be. So we're looking forward to working with you and trying to find some of the solutions to these very, very difficult and complicated problems. And I especially would like to echo Pat's comments about thanking Sam for a thankless job and your willingness to step up to the con there in the interim. I'm grateful for your leadership in the interim, and Eileen, looking forward to working with you and your leadership as well. So welcome to the Commission. Thank you for what you will do for the states, and we're looking forward to working with you.
Thanks. And I did want to say that, I'm going to try to get out and about to as many of these meetings and as many of the things that Sam covered as I can, but I don't know that I'll need to or want to, or that you will want me to be doing them all myself. I mean, I have a great team, and Sam is, number one on that team and on a lot of these issues, and so he may well continue to have the leading role, but we'll discuss that with him and with you all, and if he continues to have some of these roles, it won't be because he's not keeping me informed, but that he's been doing two jobs, and now we're going to be splitting those jobs between us.
Well, I think you come in at a good time with a lot of issues facing this commission. We had a very good meeting last night with the Mid-Atlantic Council folks, and trying to work out ways to cooperate more between the Mid and the Atlantic states. We talked a little bit about reaching out to the South Atlantic to try to do the same thing with Roy and Bob, and I think they'll be amenable to that. And you always have a good team here representing the service on the commission. So I hope it can be a very open and forthright relationship. It has been rocky in the past, but it hadn't been under Sam's leadership, and we do hate to see him go, but are glad to see somebody in the position now permanently and set, and so we'll look forward to working with you in the future.
Well, I still have more hair than Sam does, so we're not exactly the same, but I think that Sam knows a lot more than I do about these issues, but I think that one thing we do share is that I want you guys to be open with me, and you know what, I'm going to be open with you, and I think that Sam usually, as far as I can tell, Sam has gotten extra points from everybody with being very, not hiding the ball, being very forthright, not dancing around the issues, as some say, and I think that that's where we, I can't speak to the substance of any of the issues before this group at the moment, but I think you hit the nail on the head. There are no easy issues anymore in fisheries, if there ever were. I think that there only ever were because it was a lot harder to communicate with each other, so we didn't, and geography was, people in Florida didn't find out what was going on in Alaska for a few weeks or months or whatever. So but I just think that means the need to communicate, the need for transparency, and to be honest and frank without being hostile is necessary.
It works better usually. Yeah. All right. If there are no further questions or accolades for Sam, I think we all agree with those. I'd like to take a 10-minute break. I wouldn't want to have to sit up here for another 2.5 hours if I were them, and also to give some folks a chance to say hello, and then hopefully you'll stick around in the audience and stick with us for another couple of hours as we go through our policy board. So 10 minutes, folks, and I'm going to be strict on 10 minutes. Thank you. All right, I'd like to get everybody back at the table to continue with our policy board meeting. Please move the conversations to the hallway. Again, Eileen, thank you for being here. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I'm going to take care of one item of business right off while everybody's bright and bushy-tail, and give you just a quick update on some discussions and issues that were dealt with at the Executive Committee this morning, just so that everybody is aware and of what we are recommending to the Policy Board. We are still working on. I think we've got one more iteration of our draft plan for conflict of interest that we will be prepared to circulate soon. Bob is going to start passing out our declaration of interests forms. We'd like for everybody to start taking a look at those and make sure that the plans and the plans that you've declared an interest on are still pertinent, up to date, and that you are indeed involved in the plans that you think you are. And if you're involved in plans that you didn't think you were, go ahead and remove yourselves from that, or however you deem it appropriate for your state. Well, I guess we didn't do a motion for the board issues, so I guess I'm just going to bring up our suggestion and hope for an motion. I guess that would be the way to handle it. Couple of issues came up, and you probably are all familiar with New Hampshire brought up an issue about being on the Black Sea Bass Scup Flounder Board, but really only have an interest in Black Sea Bass. And there may be other jurisdictions that only have an interest in summer flounder or scup or whatever. So we talked a lot about how the South Atlantic Board works and how that's worked in the past. Is, generally speaking, that's Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, but then Virginia oftentimes is at the table. And with Black Drum, we had folks all the way up to, I guess, Delaware, maybe New York, involved with the South Atlantic Board. But generally, those states that have an interest in that individual species on that South Atlantic Board really don't participate or become involved in issues that don't really pertain to their state. So, what we thought would be a good idea is if folks would like to declare an interest in one of the two of the three species in the summer flounder sea bass scup board, that we would agree to allow that to happen. Do you have a comment?
I do, Mr. Chair. We never did the approval of agenda or proceedings or public comment as we went from one meeting to the other.
Oh, we sure didn't. All right, well, welcome. Does anybody have any comments about the agenda or the proceedings for our October meeting? Seeing none, we will accept them by consensus and move on. Sorry. Thank you. No, they know I never get a break. God, now I'm completely discombobulated on what I was talking about. Okay, so what we recommended was that the policy board consider allowing a state to declare an interest in one of those three species. They would really not be involved in the deliberations on summer flounder and scup. And there was a request, I think, from one of the states that if they do that, have the black sea bass issues first on the agenda, so that those poor folks don't have to sit through what we did yesterday on flounder. So does that adequately represent what we talked about this morning? So, is there any objection to that suggestion? Does somebody want to make a motion to that effect? We can just add it into policy, or we can have a motion to accept it or reject it if y'all don't like the idea. Pat?
Mr. Chairman, if there are no negative concerns around the table, I would suggest that you assume that we agree and just add it to the document.
Thank you, Pat. Is that agreeable to everyone around the table? The other issue that we wanted to suggest to the board was splitting up the coastal shark spiny dogfish board. There's a lot of interest back and forth in doing that. Really, the Coastal Shark Board works more with National Marine Fisheries Service and highly migratory species, and so we thought it would be a service to both of those species groups if we had a spiny dogfish board and a separate coastal sharks board. And smooth hounds, which I don't like the name smooth hounds, but that's what they call them, would be in the coastal shark plan because they're HMS for whatever reason. We still don't quite understand, but they are HMS species. So the smooth hounds would be in the coastal sharks, and spiny dogs would be a standalone. So likewise, is there any objection or concern around the table from splitting up those two boards? Great. Mr. Vice Chairman, did we have any other items at the Executive Committee that?
We formed a subgroup to help develop a workshop at the May meeting on Magnuson-Stevens reauthorization, potentially getting the Commission's input and wanting to make comment on the reauthorization plans.
Thank you. I did let that one slip. We've got a couple of versions of potential Magnuson reauthorization issues, and we felt it would be a good idea to convene a working session at the May meeting, have a work group to work out some of those details for our meeting if we want to come up with some specific recommendations on the Magnuson reauthorization. So we'll be moving forward with that approach for the May meeting. Dennis?
And also on the conflict of interest, there's some revisions that are going to be incorporated based on what was done this morning. And at the May meeting prior to the full commission meeting, there will be a meeting of the LGAs to go over those changes prior to final approval.
Bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. That working group, you have that established for the Magnuson?
We do.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Tom?
Yes, since I wasn't at the executive committee, who are the members of the working group? And how is that formed? Was the working group going to, I would like a little more information about what the working group is going to do.
Doug's going to be heading that up, so I'll let him speak to that.
Yeah, well, the group will be Paul Diodati, Pat Kelleher, and Robert Boyles, but all we're doing is organizing a workshop that's going to be at the May meeting for the full commission to weigh in. And some of the concepts that we have is there's some draft Magnuson reauthorization plans that came out in the House, and we want to put that out and explain that to people. There may be some input from other people in other organizations and suggestions to changes to Magnuson that we may want to make the commissioners aware of, and then get the commissioners' input on whether we can come to any kind of agreement or consensus on input. If we, clearly, if we don't have a consensus on an issue or agreement on an issue, I don't think we should go forward with any kind of comment on it. But that's the plan.
Tom?
That means if commissioners have ideas what should be changed and what should be done in Magnuson Act, they should be forwarded to you, Doug?
Sure.
Yeah, and I will tell you that I have been in contact with Dr. Brian Rothschild and several other folks, and he's put together some information that's very similar to the Hastings draft that has some very good information. So we're trying to put together all the information that we have between now and the May meeting so that we can have an informed discussion on that issue. Robert?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I think we've got a little miscomm here. My understanding is we're going to have a workshop for all commissioners at the May meeting. The subgroup is simply to organize how do we do that. So, Tom, I think the direction of your comments were if you've got ideas on what we would recommend about Magnuson, give them to Doug. And I believe maybe a more appropriate place would be let all of us at the workshop have the benefit of that. In other words, the subgroup is not coming up with a commission's position on Magnuson reauthorization. The subgroup is simply putting the mechanics together, what the workshop would look like.
Yeah,
did I misunderstand the discussion?
I think that was a good pickup, Robert. I think there was some confusion there. I think there was. Tom?
Well, what I'm wondering then, if we do have some position papers that we've already written, and you want to do that before we basically come to the main meeting, so we have some ideas from commissioners that already have some ideas, should we get them, who do we get them to? Should we circulate them before the meeting so we have a base to start working on, like public comment? That
would be helpful, yes.
So who do I send those ideas to, and is Doug the person to send those ideas?
Doug and CC Bob, please. Roy?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on your previous item. If I could come back to that when you're done this discussion. Thanks.
Absolutely. Any further discussion on that issue? If not, Roy?
In thinking about the previous agenda item regarding declared interest in a species or species subgroup, Mr. Chairman, do we have a general policy with regard to, say, for an example, implementation of minimum size limits for spotted sea trout, even though states to the north of Maryland haven't declared an interest in spotted sea trout? Or is that species plan specific, what the states who do not have a declared interest would be required to do with regard to species and seasons and that kind of thing? Thank you.
I'm going to try to answer it, and if I answer it incorrectly, I think Bob will correct me. Each FMP states what states are within the management board, and those are your declared interests. So those states that have the declared interest make up that management range, and you then abide by the rules within the FMP. You can have exceptions under de minimis criteria, et cetera. But if you are not a part of the FMP or have declared interest, then you are not obligated to follow the FMP. For example, currently New Hampshire is not a part of the black sea bass FMP, but they do have black sea bass in their waters, so they are not required to put any management measures in place.
Absolutely.
A brief follow-up. That may be a change of an emphasis on where we were years ago. Because I remember when the South Atlantic Board proposed spotted sea trout minimum size limits, for instance. Just about every state implemented minimum size limits. Even Delaware did so, and we had no spotted sea trout to speak of. So it hasn't always been that way. But what you're saying is that's how we will proceed?
I'm not totally sure, Roy. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in the South Atlantic Board it is somewhat unique, and there have been examples where states have been asked to implement size limits. I think New York was asked to implement a red drum size limit or something fairly recently that they followed through on. But they're not really full participants in the board, but they are. There was concern by the states to the south that a lack of a size limit in those states may create a loophole of some sort, and they were asked to implement very minimal management measures, and it's usually been more of a request that they do it than a compliance criteria, and it's I think it's generally worked out, but it's not. It's one of those things that we talked about at the executive committee this morning, kind of more of a practice of way of doing business than an actual requirement within the charter or any other guiding documents. It's just kind of how it's been working. So part of this whole discussion is, do we need to solidify those practices in some sort of guidance document?
Tom?
If I remember right, if you had a fish in your area, even though you weren't part of the board, you would have to do the minimum that was put in. You couldn't skirt the issue. And I think that's where we were many years ago, and I never knew that it changed. I mean, we do that with all the South Atlantic species, even though we don't see them, or see them very occasionally. And if you're seeing any species on a regular basis and you have opportunity to catch them,
then you really are compelled to go into the regulations. The minimum regulations need to be put in place. You might have to do reporting and everything else, but you need to put the regulation in place. And that's how we've always operated. I don't see a change there unless we're going to change that. I guess that's going to be a change then.
Well, I think from my understanding, everybody that has limits on, for example, speckled trout, red drum, had a declared interest in that fishery. Now, there may be one or two that didn't, but from my understanding, most have had a declared interest. So
That's not true.
okay. Well, then we'll do a workshop on that next meeting. I'm kidding. I'm not totally sure, Tom. I know what I do know is that in the discussion this morning, New Hampshire falls outside of the range, what we thought was the range of black sea bass. And 2 years ago, they started seeing black sea bass and waited for a year to see if it was just an anomaly, and it wasn't. They saw them again. So what they did was preemptively go in and set some minimum size limits and regulations in order to prevent there being a loophole in New Hampshire and causing problems for other mid-Atlantic New England states. So now the question is, New Hampshire believes it should be a member of the Black Sea Bass part of the Black Sea Bass Scup and Flounder Board. They don't want to sit through the scup stuff and the summer flounder stuff, nor do they believe it's appropriate for them to be discussing and deliberating on the scup stuff and the summer flounder stuff. So what they're asking for is the opportunity to sit on the South Black Sea Bass part of that board. I'm not aware of any other issue that we have right this minute other than that one. And there certainly, I'm unaware of any nefarious intent, to shirk responsibilities or anything like that. So, but that's one of the reasons why we're going to send around the list of declared interests, and that way we'll know and have a better, because I think we're still listed as having an interest in lobster, and I'm going to take that one off. And I don't have any regulations on lobster, and don't anticipate implementing any regulations on lobster. So just take a close look at those. This is all subject to change, but we just felt like it was an appropriate discussion for the policy board and to make sure that everybody was comfortable with it. Is that a fair characterization? All right. So I had Tom, and I have Bill Cole, and then Dave Simpson.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Tom's right. Historically, and I think it comes from the charter, that the board, once it or the commission, the policy board agrees to do a plan, that the board will define the scope of the range and ask each state or each entity if they have an interest in the species and want to be included on the board. Now, if a state who has the species and doesn't show an interest, then the board can do a plan, but that plan is applicable to that state because the plan applies to the range of the species. So it's smart business. If you got some in your state, you probably should declare interest in that board's activities rather than suffer other consequences. Now, that's the reason that we have this de minimis and so forth and so on for those states who have so little of those species, but to keep them inclusive, if we can, within the range of the species. Now, I will stand corrected, but I believe that is in the charter and in the operating procedures, and it is certainly in my long-time experience with the Commission has been the operating experience.
Well, we've got the spreadsheet of declared interests for all the states, if anybody's interested in looking at that. And you sent it out?
It was passed out.
Oh, okay. So, Dave?
Yeah, Bill pretty well summarized my point that you can envision boards seeing a need for a state or jurisdiction to participate in in their management. Whether or not they want to participate in the development of that management might be a different question. I think that's where we end up in coastal sharks, because of the need, because of the federal management to have seamless enforcement and implementation of their plans. They need Connecticut to do that, and so that's our involvement. Withdrawing from the Coastal Sharks Board, as much as I might want to, I don't think would relieve me of Connecticut's responsibility, relieve the state of the responsibility to implement the plan.
Okay. Anything else on that issue? If not, the final issue that was discussed, and this is why we were making fun of workshops, because it looks like the next meeting is going to have several workshops in it. One of the things we discussed was, I had a discussion on how states are going to be implementing the Marine Recreational Information Program, and felt like it would be a good idea to have that discussion in May, so we can see all the various aspects of how that's going to be implemented, from states that are very involved and active in implementing the MRIP to those that aren't so involved or active, and maybe bring in some of our project coordinators to come in and provide presentations on how that's being done, and get a sense of what we need to do in order to have more consistent, maybe, implementation of the MRIP program. Dave?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I'd also like to hear from NOAA. This is one that it struck me that it seemed like it came from below and came up. You know, I would have thought that if NOAA wanted to partner with the state of Connecticut, they would have contacted me or my bosses and said, let's get together and have a discussion about whether we want to engage in this. And instead, I'd sort of hallway discussions with the technical committee staff that, oh, by the way, the whole thing's, there's a sea change, and NOAA wants ACCSP to do all this now, and we'll be part of it. So it'd be good to hear what the thought is for why they would like to see this partnership, and what the benefits and liabilities are associated with it.
We felt like that would be, I think, a good discussion for everybody to be involved in around the table. All right. Whose arm is that sticking up? Rob, hey.
You're not going to cut it off, I hope. I just wanted to follow up on part of the discussion this morning. Also included the idea that there could be management boards. South Atlantic has multiple species, summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass. And I understand the issue about the range, and that makes sense as far as inclusion, and then the commitment of the state would be recommended, but not mandatory, to be on the board. But the inference about the black sea bass situation in New Hampshire, I thought we also discussed the idea that if New Hampshire, or anyone else for that matter, who was in a position where only one of the multiple species were of interest, then they certainly could be part of the discussion about those other species. That was also a component of today's discussion. I didn't want to let that go, so just want to put
No, thanks for that clarification. All right, just a lot going on this morning at Executive Committee, and we wanted to bring those issues forward to the Policy Board and make sure everybody was in the loop and comfortable with the suggestions, recommendations that we were making. So thank you for your indulgence on that. Nancy? Oh, see, I got discombobulated. I go back to the approval of the agenda. I forgot to add a piece of other business. There was a request from the Winter Flounder Board that we'll take up as an item of other business before we adjourn. So just messed that up all the way around. So Nancy, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you, Louis. I'm very happy to be back. I am Nancy Wallace, and I'm the director of NOAA's Marine Debris Program. And as some of you may know, I started my career as a fishery management plan coordinator here at the ASMFC. And I think it's 7.5 years later, and it's nice to see how many familiar faces are still here. It's really nice to see all these smiling faces. And I love the conversation. I was having memories of my Menhaden days. But now, instead of focusing on fish every day, I focus on trash. I am the director of the Marine Debris Program. We sit in NOAA within the National Ocean Service, so we are partnering very, very closely with our friends at NIMS, but we are in a different line office, and as such, just to start us off, we are non-regulatory, so everything that we do is through partnerships and incentives and education. We do not make any rules or regulations, but we do provide a lot of good information that can potentially lead into those types of management actions. So today, I'm here just to really share information about the program, make sure you're all aware of it, because we do have a lot of crossover with fishing gear. So I will go ahead and get started. So we are a fairly new program within the government world. We were established in 2005, officially signed into law in 2006, and then actually reauthorized, the only NOAA program to be reauthorized in the last Congress in 2012, and we were not given a sunset date, so we don't have to go through that process again, and we're very happy about that. Our vision is that the global ocean and its coasts are free of the impacts of marine debris, and we do that through a variety of ways. Okay. So what is marine debris? It's important to know what the definition of marine debris is. It's any solid man-made material that is in the marine environment that shouldn't be there. So we don't focus on oil, although my division, the Marine Debris Division, sits in the same office with our Emergency Response and Oil Division. But we focus on solid materials. It's not animal carcasses, and it's not leaves or trees. So it has to be in the definition for us to be able to work on it. It actually goes everything from the smallest pieces of plastic all the way up to derelict fishing gear or plastic bags, plastic bottles, and through very large abandoned vessels. So it can be any of those things. So our program has a number of pillars in how we address the issue. First and foremost is through removal. We give out about $1 million a year in removal grants that go out throughout the entire country, and there are community-based removal grants administered by the National Marine Fisheries Service Restoration Center, and the idea is to remove big accumulated debris. So a lot of times that's the abandoned vessels or large amounts of fishing gear. Tends not to be the smaller cleanups, but we do support those in other ways. We try to do a lot through prevention, because the number one thing we want to do is to prevent the debris from coming into the marine environment in the first place. We do that through a different set of grants, through communities. We work with aquariums and zoos and universities to share information about behavior change and how each individual person can actually have an impact on this issue. We do a lot about research. We try to look at what the impacts of marine debris is, so things like microplastics and fishing gear and vessels, what are they doing to the natural resources, to the habitat, looking at fate and transport models of marine debris to try to locate where the debris will be coming so we can have better prevention methods as well. In the past few years, we've become a lot more engaged in the emergency response aspect of marine debris, all the way from Hurricane Katrina, the Japan tsunami in 2011, and now the Superstorm Sandy in 2012. All of those different efforts we've been very engaged in, because unfortunately, anytime there's a severe event like that, there's a lot of destruction, and with destruction becomes debris, and especially in coastal areas, that debris ends up in the marine environment. And the way that we accomplish a lot of our goals is through regional coordination. We recognize that there are different challenges and different solutions in different parts of the country. This is a national program. We are focused from Guam to the Aleutian Islands, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, up to Maine, and everything in between, including the Great Lakes. So we have to tailor our responses to the different areas and what's happening there. So our program mandates. So one of the mandates in our act is to address fishing gear, and that's why I'm here today. The language itself is to undertake efforts to reduce adverse impacts of lost and discarded fishing gear on living marine resources and navigational safety, and it's in the act. It gives us 3 ways to do that: by researching researching and developing alternatives to gear that pose threats, developing methods for marking gear to enhance tracking, recovery, and identification, and developing non-regulatory measures and incentives to reduce the volume of lost and discarded fishing gear. Here's just a sample of our regional folks. These are the different folks all over the country. We have folks in Alaska, Pacific Northwest, Hawaii, Mobile, Alabama, Ohio. We do have a new person, a new Northeast Regional Coordinator who sits in the Northeast Regional Office in Gloucester. And then we have our Southeast and Caribbean Coordinator who sits here in Silver Spring. And we have recently hired a Sandy Coordinator with some of our supplemental funds, so he's leading the charge on the debris removal for Sandy. So why do we do this work? I don't have to tell all of you. I'm sure you know way better than I do what the impacts of lost and discarded fishing gear are. But the reasons we're concerned about this is because of entanglement of animals, the ghost fishing, habitat destruction, destruction to active fishing gear and vessels, and then of course the economic impact that's associated with that. In terms of entanglement, one of the concerns that we have, especially on the East Coast, is the North Atlantic right whale. In 2010, there were 10 new right whale entanglements that were recorded. This is a concern. As you all know, there's only 400 of those whales left. It's an endangered species. So what we want to try to do is mitigate the amount of debris that could be in the environment that would be affecting those animals. In terms of ghost fishing, fishermen are great at developing gear. It's going to continue to fish for a long time, whether it's pulled out or if it's not pulled out. And this is something we're concerned about because the amount of critters that are left in that gear is quite a lot. And so one of the things we're really doing is trying to look at what those impacts are, how exponential is it. And so I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes, but we've provided some funding to the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, different groups in the Chesapeake Bay, actually all over in Alaska, Puget Sound, to really start to quantify what the impacts are in terms of how many species are being caught. Another area that our program really focuses on is the plastics, microplastics in particular. So much of the marine debris that we come across is made up of plastic, whether it be the plastic bag or the plastic bottle. A lot of fishing gear has plastics in it, or just the toys and toothbrushes and the amount of things that we find on the beaches. One of the real concerns is that plastic breaks down, but it never breaks down all the way. So the pieces get smaller and smaller. And unfortunately, there's a lot of pollution in the ocean environment. There's toxins. A lot of those toxins are hydrophobic. So if there's a piece of plastic that pollutant can absorb to, it will. And so that happens. We are sure of that. Then what happens, and we're sure of this too, is that those plastics are ingested by fish, by birds, by turtles. What we don't know is what the transfer is then. So are those pollutants then releasing into the tissue of those fish? If so, what's the chain through the bioaccumulation, through the trophic chain? There's potentially some human health impacts we don't know, but we are starting to do a lot of research on the science behind that because unfortunately this plastic is just pervasive throughout the marine environment. So to give you a couple of project highlights, what we've done in our career since 2005, since the program started, we have funded over 100 different derelict gear fishing projects nationwide. A lot of that's removal, some of it's research. But just to give you a couple examples of what type of work we've done within the program, we've funded the Virginia Institute of Marine Science to look at biodegradable crab pot cull rings to see how long it takes for the cords to degrade. We've worked with the Gulf of Maine and the Maine Lobster Foundation to actually go out and collect derelict gear and look at the assessment of where that gear is ending up. Worked with fishermen in New Jersey with the Richard Stockton College to do derelict gear removal. And we've also done some pilot projects in North Carolina to look at recycling derelict crab pots into oyster reefs. And one of the main things we really try to do is to employ the fishermen to do this work because they know the area best, they know the gear the best. So for research, I mentioned this before, but we did do some pretty comprehensive work in the Chesapeake Bay. We funded a contractor, Versar, to work in the Maryland portion, and then we've also partnered with VIMS in the Virginia section to be able to see how many pots are out there and what they're catching. So in the Versar study in Maryland, they estimated that more than 84,000 traps were collected in the Chesapeake Bay. They did 285 side-scan sonar transects and found that there were 20 dead crabs per trap per year that were being caught. So that's a pretty significant number. Virginia Institute of Marine Science did a study from 2009 through 2012, and their results are actually, I think they became public today, so I wasn't going to come and share their results because I didn't want to scoop them on their study. But then as I was leaving, I saw the email that it came out. But you can follow up and look at that, but it's pretty significant, the amount that they were finding in the bay. Next. In terms of removal, some of the projects that we funded are with the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, going out and doing this as a side scan sonar track to be able to locate where the debris is. With this program, we employed 4 different fishing vessels, and with the lobster boats were on the water for 32 days, and they actually collected over 40 tons of gear in that time. It's pretty substantial. Another program that some of you may be familiar with is our Fishing for Energy program. So in 2008 and prior to that, we did a lot of workshops with fishermen and said, you know, we're finding a lot of derelict gear. Can you help us understand why we might be able to find that gear? And we've heard that there's a lot of reasons. There's storms, there's propellers that cut off the buoys that are lost, there's accidental loss. But one of the other things we heard is that disposing of derelict gear is costly, it's expensive. And so we worked with our partners at the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, at Covanta Energy and at Schnitzer Steel, and we were able to say, how can we provide a free or no-cost option for fishermen to be able to dispose of their gear and then do something with it? And so, Kate, if you hit it a couple more times, it's one of those slides. There you go. What we are able to do is that we have bins set up at ports where fishermen can go throw either their old derelict gear in the bins that they're not going to be able to use anymore, or if they're out at sea and they find gear on the beach that they can get rid of, that's a free place for them to put that too. Schnitzer Steel takes the metals out, recycles the metal, and then Covanta Energy takes it to their waste-to-energy facilities, and it's incinerated and it's put back into the grid. So we're really excited about this because it's a win-win situation. So far, we've collected over 2.2 million pounds of nets at 41 different bins across the country, and more than 250 tons of gear have been removed by fishermen through grants. So we do a Fishing for Energy grant program as well that NOAA helps provide support for. And these are our bin locations. As you can see, the majority of the bins are in New England. We've had great success, especially in Massachusetts, where we've heard from the fishermen that they're really excited about this. What we hear more and more from fishermen is that they would love to see more bins and more locations. We would love that too. We are trying to think about how to make these more self-sustaining, so to be able to provide seed money to new ports and then have those ports kind of self-sustain over time so we can expand the program. I wanted to share one just slide on our work related to Superstorm Sandy, since it does affect many of the states that you all are from. We received about $5 million in the Sandy supplemental. We're working, that was to survey and assess debris that was generated. We want to be able to do a little bit more than just survey and assess. We want to give money to the states to actually remove that debris. So NOAA, through our Office of Coast Survey and some of our other offices, are able to do a lot of that mapping. We're taking that information, we're providing it to our state partners. So really, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware are the 5 that we're focusing on right now. We're developing agreements, and we're going to be transferring money to those states to be able to actually go out and remove the debris. So all of the funding will be transferred by September 30th of this year, hopefully much sooner, and a lot of the work will be done by that time. So for 2014, fiscal year 14, we've just recently got our budgets, not the final number, but luckily things are looking okay. And we're taking a new approach to our research this year. We've funded, as I mentioned, 100 different derelict fishing gear studies all across the country in the last 7 or 8 years. And what we want to do now is, instead of kind of putting a little bit of money into a lot of different projects, this year we're going to put as much as we can into one big project. And so we're going to try to look at the comprehensive impacts of derelict fishing gear in the Chesapeake Bay. We chose the Chesapeake Bay because there's a lot of data that's already been collected there. There's a lot of great partnerships with the watermen there. We did look at other areas of the country, and after a lot of discussions and research, we focused in on the Bay. So what we're going to be doing is looking at kind of the amounts, so the abundance, the location, the impacts from an economic standpoint as well as a natural resource and habitat standpoint, and come up with a final answer. We're going to be doing that through an external contract. We have a statement of work ready to go, and as soon as we get the final okay on our budget, we're going to send it out the door. We are hopeful that the contractor will work with the different groups that have been doing this work already, and we're pretty excited. Now, as I said, we're not regulatory, so we're not going to be suggesting any changes, but what we can do is provide the information to you. And what I'm hopeful is that through this study, we'll also be able to really hone in on why this derelict year is happening, to look for solutions to prevent it from occurring in the first place. So as I mentioned, we're a small program, and the partnerships that we work on are really important. We would not be able to do any of the work we do without our partnerships. The nonprofits, the state, local, and federal agencies that do a lot of this work, the fishermen and other industries that we work for, and our researchers and the academic community have been critical to the success of the program to date. And so we're thankful for that. And this is my last slide, and I just wanted to say thank you very much for the time and sharing what we do. I have a different turtle for every region I'm in. This is the East Coast turtle, the Maryland, the diamondback, terrapin. Yeah, it's a terrapin. Yep. So just really wanted to see. I don't know how we're doing on time, but if there is time and you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or if you have any interest after, I can always be reached to follow up.
Thank you, Nancy. Questions for Nancy? Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hello, Nancy. And I wish you had mentioned Atlantic croaker, which you were so much involved with.
That was another favorite.
CDAR, but that's okay. What I wanted to ask was, I wasn't sure how what NOAA is doing dovetails with something coming up very soon, which is a Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan, which spun off, I guess, last year. There was at the Marine Aquarium, there was a Marine Debris Summit, which I didn't get to attend, but one of our staff did, and I was wondering how those were linked, and is that in turn linked somehow back to the initiative for the Chesapeake Bay?
Thanks, Rob. That's a great point. Yes, so we are very engaged in the Virginia effort. I have to say, Virginia, I think, is taking the lead on developing a regional plan. So the NOAA provided funds through the Coastal Zone Management Program to the state of Virginia. Virginia said marine debris is an issue. We want to work on it. So they've developed a working group to develop an action plan. I actually was on the phone yesterday with Katie Register. She interviewed me to kind of call down on some of the main issues, and they're doing that with, I think, 20 different partners. So our East Coast coordinator has attended all of those meetings and is very linked. One of the things that we have been able to do as a program is help facilitate the development of regional action plans. So we have a Hawaii Marine Debris Action Plan, there's a West Coast plan, we're going to finalize a Great Lakes plan in the next few weeks, but what we don't have is any East Coast or Gulf of Mexico plans. And so I have to say I've been really impressed by Virginia, especially because they are the first state to come out and say we want to do our own plan without NOAA kind of prodding and facilitating. What we're able to do then is provide funding through our grants process to help implement the actions that are in these regional plans. So now that we have a Northeast coordinator, we're going to try to develop some sort of Northeast regional plan and continue down. We have a workshop scheduled in Florida in May and one in South Carolina in June that will be addressing North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia issues for a plan. So great point. And yes, we will absolutely be linking those efforts with the Chesapeake Bay research study, and our coordinator is kind of the connecting piece between all of that.
Lauren?
Yes, thank you for a very, very interesting report. Really support what you're doing. I was very interested when you were speaking about derelict gear being used to enhance oyster reef, I believe in the Chesapeake. Can you comment about the use of derelict vessels that might be used and the cost thereof for cleanup and the like to actually sink those vessels and make them into artificial reef? About 5 years ago, I went on a Coast Guard vessel that was moored at Key West, Florida from World War II, and was very interested to find out about 6 months later that it was actually sunk off of Sarasota, Florida. So, I know the opportunities there. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. No, that's a great question because, as marine debris is abandoned vessels, but we've worked really closely with the state historic preservation offices. There's a lot of historic wrecks that we would never, ever touch, and we don't consider those, the same type of debris. I know in the Gulf of Mexico and Florida, there's a lot of rigs, not rigs, there is a rigs to reef program in the Gulf of Mexico, but vessels as well that are sunk. From our standpoint, we try to keep things out of the marine environment that shouldn't be in the marine environment, but anytime there's an artificial reef developed, there's quite an extensive permitting process. We work with EPA, with the states, NOAA's involved, and so there's a lot of assessment to see if there will be benefit to those types of, will the habitat that's being created be more important than perhaps putting the debris in the ocean in the first place. And so in some cases that is acceptable. In other cases, I can tell you one of the programs that we're working on, that we're funding right now, is in Broward County, Florida, where in the 70s there was a decision to put a ton of tires down on the habitat, on the benthic habitat, to develop reef. And now the tires are completely breaking up. The reef was never, this one was in Broward County, Florida. And so now we're spending a lot of money trying to remove it. So, there's always kind of the give and take of any of these decisions and the long-term sustainability of anything we're putting in the ocean. The oyster one was in North Carolina, the oyster pots, the habitat, yeah.
Yeah, after every hurricane, we have sometimes we'll have as many as 5,000 tires wash up on our beaches. We got to go pick them up, thanks to a brilliant idea back in the mid-'80s to put them out there. Further questions for Nancy, and she will be available afterward, right, Nancy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, for a little bit.
It was great to see you, and thank you very much for an excellent presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Next is we have Mike Petney, review of the proposed rulemaking on special management zones for 5 artificial reefs off the coast of Delaware.
He's going to stay back there.
Oh, you're going to stay back there? That's fine. Okay.
That's okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Tony or KT of the map. All right. So my purpose here today is just to give the Commission a brief update and background on an action that we are currently considering. We're in the process of developing a proposed rule, but we have not published the rule yet. But we intend to continue to consult with the Commission throughout our process before we make a final decision on these proposed special management zones. So those of you on the Mid-Atlantic Council may recall this has been developing for the last several years. In 2011, the state of Delaware petitioned the Mid-Atlantic Council to consider requesting that that NIMS designate 5 artificial reefs off the coast of Delaware as special management zones. And that is a term of art that appears in the summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass fishery management plan that authorizes the council, the Mid-Atlantic Council, to request the agency to designate artificial reefs as SMZs and essentially create gear-restricted areas within the special management zones to facilitate recreational fishing or really to facilitate or address and remedy gear conflicts that can occur on some of these reefs. So as I mentioned, in 2011, the state of Delaware requested the council to consider this. The council undertook the process that's required in the regs under the Black Sea Bass FMP. They appointed a team to review the information, develop a proposal for the council to consider, held a series of public hearings on the issue, and in June of 2013, just last year, or actually February of last year, sorry, it's been about a year, the Mid-Atlantic Council formally requested that the agency consider designating these 5 areas that you have up on the map there as these SMZs under the authority that we have in the Black Sea Bass FMP. So, as I mentioned, we are reviewing that request and developing a proposed rule. We are developing an environmental assessment under NEPA to go along with that proposed rule. I expect that we will have a proposed rule out in the next 2 to 3 months. We'll probably have an extended comment period, maybe 60 days, because of the unique aspects of this issue. What the council has requested and that we're entertaining is that the areas that are there would be restricted to hook and line fishing and hand harvest. There would be a 500-yard buffer around each reef, and so those would essentially become gear-restricted areas where pot fishing and mobile gear fishing would be restricted from those areas. I do want to point out that the interpretation, what we're hearing is people are perceiving this as a recreational versus commercial fishing action, and the council did not request, and we are not considering prohibiting all commercial fishing from these areas. We are simply proposing that or intend to propose that the areas be restricted to hook and line fishing, be it recreational or commercial. And the primary intent of this is to reduce gear conflicts that the state of Delaware and others have been occurring on these reefs. And it's also, as you probably know or may not know, is an attempt by the state of Delaware to ensure that it does not lose any sources of funding under the Sport Fish Restoration Act. The Fish and Wildlife Service administers. New Jersey, as you know, lost access to some funding for its reef program because the state did not have any mechanism to address gear conflicts on those reefs. And so this is an effort by the state of Delaware to ensure that it can continue to be eligible for funding under that program in order to maintain and enhance those reefs. So unless there's any questions, I'll stop there and see if there's any questions that you may have.
Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No question, just a comment, just for the board's edification. The state of South Carolina has requested similar actions from the South Atlantic Council, and that has been the case. Our reefs have been designated special management zones for a number of years, and most recently the state requested and the council approved, and NIMP subsequently implemented regulations to prohibit the possession of species and snapper grouper and coastal migratory pelagics in excess of the personal bag limit. So for what it's worth, I support this effort and think it's a good step and a good move for the state of Delaware to do this, recognizing that we're going to have more and more gear conflicts as habitats become further constrained. And so for what it's worth, I'd just offer moral support. I'm not sure you're looking for a position from this body, Mr. Chairman, but I certainly support the effort.
Yeah, as I recall, and I may be completely off here, but as I recall, the South Carolina SMZs were granted, or the council agreed to the recommendations from the state of South Carolina because, or one of the reasons was because all of your reefs were constructed by Wallop-Bro funds and were not funded by taxpayer dollars. I guess that would be my question of the Delaware reefs, are those fully funded by recreational dollars or are there taxpayer dollars? Because that's where we ran into a problem in North Carolina, where we had Wallop-Bro money, but we also had appropriated dollars, state dollars, that went into building those reefs, and that created a problem for us when we went in that direction. And I don't know if you run into the same issue with Delaware or not.
Yeah, I can't answer that question directly, but it is something that we're looking at.
Yes, sir.
Delaware's program is funded, Dave Savakis. Delaware's program is funded exclusively with Wallop-Bro funds and matching state license money, recreational license money.
You shouldn't run into a problem then. Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And initially, just not to put too fine a point on it, but I think our initial issue in South Carolina was bang sticks. So it started out as a gear conflict issue, and only in the last several years when we started getting gear conflicts and user conflicts did we pursue this effort to limit possession to the personal bag limit. But again, that's something that's been implemented. Had a lot of discussion at the council level, and again, I support the effort.
Yeah, if it's all, if it's all recreational money and you're actually going to allow commercial hook and line fishery on those reefs, I'd be hard pressed to find an objection for what Delaware's trying to accomplish. There may be others that feel differently, but that would be my general sense. Tom?
What are bang sticks? I never heard that phrase.
Sticks that go bang. They're exploding spears. They're actually a shotgun shell on a stick, and you pop the fish with them, and it explodes and kills them. Yeah.
We use them for shark fishing. They used to use them for shark fishing, but I thought you had some other gear that was called a bang stick. I understand what a bang stick is.
Yeah, they created quite a stir in the South Atlantic 8 or 9 years ago down in Jekyll Island. That was a very interesting meeting. Yes, Dave Simpson.
I just wondered if someone from Delaware could just give us the 1 minute lowdown on what the reefs are made of and how this came about and all that. Just.
Dave, the Delaware reefs are derelict vessels, the most recent ones, particularly the most recent one is a fairly large derelict vessel. That's about 20 miles offshore. But other reefs are made of materials of opportunity, including New York subway cars, concrete culvert, that type of material. And was that good enough, Dave?
Anything else on this issue? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is Tony is going to review the survey results from our 2013 Commissioner Survey that I know everyone filled out and submitted in a timely way.
Well, if everyone, you mean 27 commissioners? Yes, everyone. The survey is included as part of our 2014 action plan, and the purpose of this survey is to measure the progress towards the Commission's goals. And as I just said, 27 out of 45 commissioners responded, which is up from last year. I think we had 24, so we're moving in the right direction. Maybe next year I'll provide free incentive for those of you that fill out the survey and actually tell me that you filled out the survey, because I think we only had about 15 people tell us they filled out the survey. The survey asks for your input on responses of a scale from 1 to 10, and it has 5 topics, 20 questions. You range your answers on not supportive all the way to very supportive, and then there are 5 open-ended questions to finish up the survey. Overall, there seems to be increased satisfaction from commissioners. Almost all responses are at a 6 or above. I'm just going to go through a couple and not to go through each question. The results of the survey were in the supplemental materials. And the graph just shows you how our responses have been over time since 2010 when we started this survey. So it seems like folks have had an increased confidence that we can achieve the Commission's vision, and as well as that we're fairly satisfied with the cooperation between commissioners to achieve our vision, and that we are moving in the right direction towards cooperation with our federal partners, which in the past 2 years had gone down. So I'm glad to see that we're doing a better job there. One of the areas where we had a slight declining trend is the satisfaction with our efforts to describe progress to the public and stakeholders, as well as showing transparency in the Commission decision-making process. The other 2 areas where we had declining downward trends, which are similar in scale here, was our how comfortable we are with the performance in reacting to new information and adapting accordingly to our Commission goals, as well as due to our limited scope of authority, how comfortable are you with the Commission spends the appropriate amount of time or appropriate amount of resources on issues within its control. And there was also a slight downward trend there. So to the open-ended questions, there were a lot of responses, so I just pulled out some that seemed to have a little bit of repetition in those responses. What is the most significant problem the Commission could and should solve? Improve stakeholder transparency, depleted and overfished Commission fisheries, time and responsive management decisions, equity and allocation of our resources, multi-species and adaptive management in light of changing environments, and having a high level of confidence in monitoring research and stock assessments. What's the most important challenge the Commission could make to improve results? Have meaningful and effective reform of the recreational catch and effort data collection systems, making hard decisions, have more staff resources and Commission staff to conduct stock assessments, have adaptive management to changing resource distribution and abundance, and rebuild and restore fisheries. The next open question is, what is our biggest obstacle to Commission success? Lack of resources, and those were about funding, lack of resources, having political pressure from stakeholders, states, and other areas, the Endangered Species Act, environmental changes and limited control over those. And there is a consistent message that we can only manage our fisheries and we have no control over habitat and other such areas, as well as data collection. And then, is the Commission using the appropriate metrics to measure progress? And in general, it sounds like, yes, we are, but we may want to start looking into ecosystem approaches. They should not change according to the status of the stock, so our current metrics do change sometimes in an FMP according to the status of stock, and that they shouldn't. We are short-sighted to look at success just on a rebuilt status, and that we should be looking at the bigger picture more and have an emphasis on fishery mortality metrics over biomass. And then with the additional comments that we received, we've had a lot of accolades to the staff and our leadership here at the Commission, that we should use the cutoff button less at board meetings, and that we should have equitable allocation of restored fisheries. So based on the results of
I couldn't resist.
These are y'all's comments, not mine. I just passed them along. There weren't that many additional comments, so I thought I'd throw it in there. So based on the results of the survey, does the Commission want to react to these survey results? And if so, what are they? And then secondly, is the survey an effective tool, and is it something that you want us to keep doing in the future?
Thank you, Tony. Questions for Tony? Y'all want to keep doing this? All right. Yeah, I think it's a good pulse measure, if that's a good term. I mean, I really don't think there's a whole lot we can discuss about it, other than please fill out the daggone thing. It doesn't take any time, really. So it would be helpful, you know. So everybody that didn't fill it out, I want you to raise your hand. Hey, all right. Dennis?
Looking at the trend charts, I don't think you can rely much on those, because you really don't know who's filling out the survey every year due to attrition or people's choice in filling it out or not. So I don't think that it shows you a whole lot that you can rely on. You really need some way of knowing who's filling out the survey.
One of the things that we can do in SurveyMonkey, I believe, is say, fill in your name. We haven't done that in the past to allow you all to be anonymous and be comfortable about saying whatever you want in the survey. But if you would like us to have you all put your name in the SurveyMonkey survey, we can do that. So we know who's filling it out for sure. Right now you're supposed to email me or Deke, and there were several people that filled out the survey that did not tell us. So.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's significant that, there are changes in those who fill out the surveys. or even if 27 out of 45 filled them out, although you would hope for much better. But it may be important to know something about the downward trends, regardless of what is causing them. On the couple figures where you see that, there is, less transparency, for example, was one of them. It might be good to know something about that. I don't know how you would do that. I don't think anyone's going to tell us right now why they think that, or maybe they would, but, that's something worth paying attention to.
Absolutely, especially that one. Jim?
Just as a suggestion, and, if we don't want to go to actual, putting names down, maybe the number of years as you've been sitting as a commissioner, because I think the first couple of years I filled it out, I had very different responses than I have now. So, and that may, you could, tweak that a little bit and say people that have been sitting 5 or longer years may have a different perspective. Thank you.
Walter?
Anything over 50% is a pretty good return on a survey, and I don't think the variations in those trends are significant enough, given that 50-something percent, 60% response, to be worried about. But I think it's good, and I think the responses to the open-ending questions are probably more useful to us. I don't know who has an issue with the cutoff button, though.
I can't imagine. It's used very infrequently. It's usually on Pat. But so did you fill out the survey, Pat?
Maybe it's me.
I have used it a couple of times. Tom?
Yeah, the way I used to, 50% is really great on a survey. I mean, in order to get even close to that, we used to have to give away a $500 prize for filling out the survey. So maybe if you gave out a prize, you'd get more survey responses just by telling people that they did it.
Yeah, but I mean, when you got a group of 45 people that are dedicated to this cause, I would hope that we would have much higher than 50%. I realize 50% is great in like a mail-out survey or surveying the public, but when you're surveying the commission, I would expect to see 45 responses out of 45 people. I mean, and then we don't have to wonder, Dennis, if the results are meaningful or not. So, Rob?
I can't help but saying it's really 60%, so we've already progressed quite nicely.
Sounds like weak fish. Any further comments on the survey? Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Louis. I appreciate the slight uptick in the survey response as it relates to the engagement with the feds, but I would greatly appreciate any additional comments that you all want to provide that are suggestions for ways that we can continue to improve that, whether that's as part of this discussion right now or over a beer at the bar. I think we are very interested in moving that up much higher than it is right now, and so suggestions on how to do that would be greatly appreciated.
Y'all be nice. That was too easy, though, Kelly. Anything else on the survey? All right. Discuss definitions for the annual fisheries performance overview. This sounds like an exercise in wordsmithing again.
It could be an exercise in wordsmithing. So back in August, we went over the annual performance of the stocks. And just to remind everybody, the purpose of that is to support the policy board's review of stock rebuilding performance and management board actions, and to provide direction to management boards for our action plan each year. And we want to validate the status or rate of progress, and if it's an acceptable versus not acceptable, and and if not acceptable, identify appropriate corrective action. And that document has a lot of words in there that we did not define, and the policy board asked me to go back and get some definitions for the categories that are in the document. And so I put together a white paper that was in your supplemental materials that suggests adding some language in there as part of the annual performance of the stock that describes the 5 categories that we use for each of the stocks and those definitions, and we would also include those definitions as a part of our stock status overview, which is the one-pager that has the up-down for each of our species that you see often in the back of the table that we take to trade shows, etc. So we have 6 categories, in the performance document. The first is rebuilt. Rebuilt is biomass is equal to or above the biomass level set by the FMP. Rebuilding is biomass is approaching the target level established by the FMP to ensure population sustainability. Overfished, biomass falls below the threshold set by the FMP, reduces the stock reproductive capacity to replace fish removed through harvest. And depleted reflects low levels of abundance, though it is unclear whether fishing mortality is the primary cause for the reduced stock status. And so that's sort of the difference between overfished and depleted, is that we don't know where that mortality is coming from. Concerned is stocks that are developing emerging issues prior to the completion of a stock assessment. So this is going to range the scope of stocks that we're looking at. It'll only be those stocks that we have assessments that are ongoing or right about to be upcoming, and there seems to be some hot button issues that we want to look at. And then unknown is just stocks that have no accepted stock assessments. And that's all.
Very good. Can you go back to the first 2? Mm-hmm. Okay. No hands. Dave.
Yep. I have a sheet that Tony gave me, and it doesn't have the concerned one on it, but I think that could be a really useful addition.
The concern is in the paragraph language. It's not in the table, but we can add it to the table. The table we were just going to use in the up-down, the quick overview, and I don't believe we actually have concerned as a category on that. If it is, I'll add it in, but if it's not, I didn't think that we would want to throw it in there, because then I thought it would add confusion.
So for overfished, we might want to expand that definition to include or reduce the stock's capacity to produce optimum yield. So if you just added or produce optimum yield, I think that would cover both, the textbook definition of growth, growth overfishing and recruitment overfishing. And I wanted to ask if it was intentional to say significantly reducing. In other words, right now, if the target biomass is 100 and we're at 99, we say we're overfished. Is the intention here to say, well, we wouldn't call it overfished at 99, but some other level? Was that the intention of that?
I'm going to ask Katie Drew to come to the microphone, because she and I worked on these together as a team effort from the science department to make sure we are on the same board.
I guess that's where I was thinking concern might fall in, that, in between overfished and not overfished, it would provide that little area of, okay, we're a little below where our target is, but we're not prepared to call it overfished.
Part of the reason that we include sort of a biological component to these definitions here is to make this more, I think, accessible and transparent, so that overfished isn't just crossing a line. It's not just about what's in management. It's that management has a biological, has a scientific purpose behind these designations. So in that respect, so we wanted to combine this definition to explain you're crossing this line, but this is bad because there's a scientific reason. It's not an arbitrary threshold. I think species of concern is more in the unknown section. If we wanted to create a category for species that are somewhere between the target and the threshold, or whatever, in terms of trying to explain that we have concerns about that, I mean, I think that would be a separate designation from what this structure has already created.
Okay, but and I appreciate the transparency thing, but I mean this would be the interpretation guide for performance on our FMPs, and those do have definitions and do kind of have lines that if you're 1 inch on the to the left of the line, then you're overfished in some of our FMPs, right? So are we looking to change that, or?
No.
No, I think let me try here. If you're below the threshold, you're overfished, whether it's 1 inch or 24 inches. So if the biomass falls below the threshold, or if when you do the assessment, you determine in an unknown stock, let's say, you do the assessment and it comes out you're at 0.99 trying to get to 1, you're still overfished. Your goal is the target. So you got to get it up above the threshold in order to start rebuilding towards the target. So I don't know if that gets to your concern or not.
I think it would if all of our plans have thresholds and targets. Do we? Like for Tautog, I don't remember a threshold, for example.
All the plans do not have thresholds and targets.
Then that is a problem.
I mean, but in that case, then we would be more in the unknown, because if we don't have it, it's usually because that part either there is no assessment or that part of the assessment did not pass peer review. So status would be unknown in terms of overfished versus overfishing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and I don't want to belabor it because I think this is great, and Tony gave me a definition of depleted, so I really should leave here happy today, and I will. But still, with TOG, because we don't have a threshold, it's the latest status is still overfished, and that's kind of that line in the sand with no gray between threshold and target. So maybe as we amend plans, we want to incorporate more of that zone of good, warning, and bad.
Tom?
Hey, Tony. Sorry, thanks. So I just had a quick question for you on the rebuilt and rebuilding. What do you call a stock that's never been overfished or depleted and is above its biomass target?
Unique. We don't have any of those.
Oh, yeah, I raise this because we deal with this sometimes in the agency, that if it's not under a formal rebuilding program, it's not ever been declared overfished, its biomass is going to vary around, your target. It doesn't go from rebuilt to rebuilding, flip-flop back year and year. It's just, it is what it is. And so I'm just wondering, if these are terms meant to apply only to stocks that have at one point been overfished, or if they're meant to be terms of general applicability to clarify that they may not. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't think we have any stocks fisheries that actually fall into that category.
I understand what you're saying, though, and I think the way we do it at home is our rebuilt category is actually called viable, and that is a stock that's it's producing maximum sustainable harvest, and it may have met this rebuilding trajectory well, but I think rebuilt and viable, from my perspective, are kind of interchangeable in this context.
Yeah, and that's helpful. I would point out summer flounder. So we declared that rebuilt a few years ago. It's no longer above the biomass target, so you can call it technically rebuilt this year, but I wouldn't call it rebuilding because it's not under a rebuilding program. We're just varying around the biomass target. I don't know, viable sounds like a good term for something like that.
Well, I mean, if we, I understand what you're saying.
I mean, they call it, but, I guess my question would be back, summer flounder is categorized as rebuilt by the service as well, right?
Yeah, well, it's categorized as rebuilt because we completed we had a formal rebuilding plan.
Right.
And we rebuilt the stock.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that the biomass is going to always stay above the biomass target. In fact, it's not above the biomass target this year. It's not overfished. It's not under a rebuilding plan, so we can't really call it rebuilding. It's just that's why I'm raising this. There's this gray area that trips us up sometimes.
I mean, we can create a seventh category if that's the will of the commissioners.
Viable. We found viable to work in North Carolina because we started with healthy, and then there started to be some connotations towards public health, and the mercury issue and all that stuff came up, and then that's when we went back to viable. So I think we can work on a viable definition. I'm not going to take the time to wordsmith it right now, but I think it would probably behoove us to have that, to address that gray area. I did have one comment on the next set of, or maybe the previous ones.
Overfishing?
Overfished, no. Which one was it?
Rebuilt?
Yeah.
Down, yeah.
Rebuilt. Yeah. We ran into some problems with this at home, and we have the same category of rebuilding. And biomass doesn't necessarily have to be approaching the target, because a lot of people misinterpret what does approaching mean. And that means you're really close. That's what some people think. But you might have a stock like, I don't want to use an example, but that is progressing towards the target. And I would suggest changing that to biomass is progressing towards the target, not necessarily approaching it. And that gives you that flexibility, because some of these rebuilding plans might be 10, 15, 20 years, and they might be in a rebuilding situation for a long period of time. But that was just hopefully to be a clarifying statement.
We can do that.
Rob?
I guess we're looking for, is the word transparency that I'm hearing a lot, but consistency is what grabs me. With these particular definitions, the rebuilding and also the rebuilt, I think they're tied together, obviously, and so I don't know why we wouldn't say the biomass target. Instead of the word level, use the word target in the top definition, and instead of the word level, use the word biomass, target biomass, in the second part of that. I think that is a little clearer. I think everyone recognizes about targets. Once we start talking about levels, we're losing the consistency there. And then I wanted to comment just briefly on the summer flounder example. That's a tough one because it was rebuilt, but each year it's treated as if it really still is rebuilt, or there wouldn't be efforts to, have the full ACL assumed to be taken, and also have, when the SSC has their risk policy, everything we're doing while we're, falling behind by 39% since 2011 is because it's treated as rebuilt still in a way. So it's not a clear-cut situation, that's for sure, because it's not as if the council or us or the SSC are just saying, well, we'll just go forward and we won't worry about the fact that it was just recently rebuilt. It's almost being treated as if it's still rebuilt.
Walter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I hope we do get a definition. I don't know if viable is the right word, but I can't think of a better one, so we'll go with that. Because like lobster in the Gulf of Maine is in good shape, and we don't want to be making people think that it isn't or that it wasn't, so I don't think we want to use rebuilt for it because it's never been overfished, but well, by some definitions it has.
Doug, last word. Bob, I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't know your hand had been up.
That's all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would just note with interest that in Dr. Rothschild's paper that he wrote that I read in preparation for the Executive Committee meeting on Magnuson reauthorization issues, if I'm not mistaken, he's suggesting replacing in Magnuson overfishing with depleted because of the pejorative nature of overfishing and the notion that a stock's maximum biomass may be lower than its target due to factors other than fishing. And I just thought it was interesting to see the two side by each on the I guess it's the next slide, meaning we're continuing forward with the two terms, the second one being, I guess, where you really don't know what's causing the depletion, and I guess overfish being, I guess I'm just sort of stuck on, he's piqued my interest in this issue of whether it's fair and more appropriate to use the word depleted versus overfished, and so I maybe just offer that up for comment and consideration. Thank you.
Bob, I actually had read through the House bill of Magnuson and saw that they were replacing, and the rationale that we use for leaving both definitions there is that we have a couple of stock assessments where our technical committees are pretty adamant that those stocks are depleted in the sense that they really aren't clear what is causing the downward trend in the biomass. And there are other assessments where it's much more clear what's going on. And we wanted to be able to have a distinguishing category between those two. And so that was the rationale for having both there, and the unknown of what would come out of Magnuson.
If I could follow up, so is it implied or should we make it explicit that by overfished we are in fact referring to fishing mortality, fishing pressure being the result that the maximum biomass is not being achieved? I think I heard you just say that's essentially why we want to keep the two terms. In some cases we know, or we think we know, that we aren't achieving our biomass targets based on fishing pressure, therefore we need to reduce it, versus a depleted status, in which case we just don't know what's causing it.
Or where we think the major source of pressure is coming from fishing. It may not be all, but...
I don't know how comfortable I feel leaving this discussion.
Come back with it.
I mean, the way, and I don't want to keep saying, the way we do it, but we have one definition, it's depleted, and indicate in the definition of depleted that it may be due to fishing, it may be due to other things, it may be due to a combination of those things, but we really don't know. I mean, ecological variability and recruitment success is a factor that can lead to a depleted status, as can overfishing. It's not going to be one or the other. So I'd almost rather work with you to take another look at this and bring it back in May if there's not an objection, especially for my vice chairman. So, Doug?
Well, you said you're not comfortable leaving this discussion, so I'm going to discuss it some more. I appreciate the way Tony went forward with this because there is a new term in Magnuson, or at least in the draft, of depleted, and I think it's good that we try and put a definition to it. We've also, in some of our management, we've had some concern in northern shrimp that we're calling it overfished, when there's some pretty strong evidence that it's temperature that's driving it right now. And so there's been some call in some part of our commissioners to have a depleted status for them because of that. And I think the gray area here where we have an overfished, which is primarily but not totally the result of overfishing, and then a depleted where it can either be primarily the result of some other factor, although we recognize there may be some overfishing that occurred at some point, or, as was mentioned, something that was unknown. We don't know for sure whether it's because of fishing or because of other factors. And I think we have to, there's no way you're ever going to have a black and white definition of both of them. But I think it's clear that we need two definitions, and it seems like there's some potential other people that feel that we need to have some second definition for something that isn't directly and primarily caused by overfishing.
Didn't I have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was one of the people that Doug spoke about at the shrimp meeting that has a problem with some of the terminology, and I'm glad that we're looking at depleted. Even with the definition of overfished we have, and if we continue to use it, the problem I have with the term is it blames the wrong people. It has the connotation that it's the fisherman's fault. And it's the manager's fault if something is overfished, but people target the people that are fishing the resource, and if we allow it to continue to be harvested beyond its capacity, that's our fault, and it probably should be mismanaged, not overfished.
Was that one comment? We don't know that we don't know that we're not over. I'm looking for something real quick. Anybody else have their hand up while I'm looking for this? Daggone it. It's worth the wait. Depleted stocks are those stocks where the spawning stock abundance is below a predetermined threshold or where low stock abundance precludes an active fishery. Factors that can contribute to depleted status include, but are not limited to, fishing, predation, competition, water quality, habitat loss, recruitment, variability, disease, or a combination of these factors. Determination is based on approved stock assessments. Covers everything. And then you don't have that negative connotation of overfishing being suggestive that that is the sole factor because of the decline. So we can work on these definitions and come back with some additional options, and I'll work with Tony on that, and we'll get something out to you, and we'll have a lot of fun with it. Yeah. Yes, we will. Anything further on our definitions? If not, I was about to do something in the Shad and River Herring Board.
Yep, me again. Cancer crabs.
Oh, yeah. Cancer crabs from Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have been discussing the possibility of conducting a cancer crab fishery management plan based on the recommendation from a fishery improvement project that has been coming out of the New England states that has been, I guess, moderated by the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. We were hoping that they would have a set of recommendations for us in time for this meeting, but we do not, and so therefore we will put off this discussion until the May meeting. But between now in May, we will be putting together our 2014 budget based on the action plan and the newly approved strategic plan. And so I'm asking the policy board if you want me to go ahead and put a placeholder in that budget for meetings for an FMP. If we went ahead and did do one, it can easily be removed from the budget if the board decides not to initiate an FMP.
Is everybody comfortable with that approach? Okay.
I don't know if these people want to say anything about the budget.
No.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully expect to have what we expected to have this month at the next meeting. The members of the Fisheries Improvement Project did not feel that the information that we assimilated had a proper review and had time to get here in time for everybody to review that. So we wanted to hold off. We didn't want to give a half-done request.
But you're comfortable with this approach? Okay. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also a participant in that process with Steve, and I'm very comfortable with this strategy. The documentation that's been put together, I think, is fairly comprehensive. It's about 45 pages long, lays out everything that's known about Jonah crabs. There are a couple of sections that are still being worked on, and these include the minimum size, size at sexual maturity information, a characterization of the processing industry and how much it's worth, and of, I think, significance is the fact that my understanding is the National Marine Fisheries Service in the next couple of weeks is going to announce the SK grants. MAFS, DMF put in a proposal to do research on Jonah crabs, and it will be very helpful to know whether or not they actually get that grant, because I think that'll lend a lot of credibility to the information that comes out of this group. So I support the delay, and I think you'll get a much better product as a result of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Anything further on the cancer crab issue? If not, I'm going to move into other business and call on Richie White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Winter Flounder Board has requested the Policy Board to task Commission leadership to work with the New England Fisheries Management Council leadership for more inclusive winter flounder management at the NRCC meeting this spring.
Richie, was that a motion or just a seeking consensus of the policy board?
Seeking consensus, a motion. We can do a motion, but I figured if there was consensus, wouldn't need.
Is there any objection to the proposal that Richie's put forward on behalf of the Winter Flounder Board to seek greater cooperation with the New England Council and the Commission on Winter Flounder Management? I wouldn't think there would be any. All right, we'll take that forward to the NRCC meeting in the spring and talk with the reps from the New England Council, and Terry Stockwell is one of them who is their chair. So I think the communication's already started, so we're in good shape. Any other business for the policy board? I do not think there's any on the agenda. I got Rob and Bob. I'll go Rob first.
Mine's very quick. In the document handed out, the one-page document for the declaration of interest, I see future planning activity blue crab, and I guess I was just wondering what that's all about.
Are you volunteering to write the FMP, Rob?
No.
Well, then nothing's going to happen. No, that's a list that's been sort of a carryover for at least a decade. Black drum used to be on the list, and now it's moved on to the completed list. But there's blue crab and smelt and a number of other things on there. There's really no priority or intention to initiate any of those FMPs right now. Those are just ones that have come up in the past as something the Commission may want to consider in the future, but there's no plans right now.
Thank you.
Bob Ballou?
Thank you. Mine will also be quick. At the annual meeting, this policy board supported the writing of a letter to the MID and to the service, I believe, regarding black sea bass. I'm wondering if we've received any response. Thank you.
Tony can handle that one.
We did write a letter and sent it, and we have not received a response.
Anything else? We'll follow up on that, Bob, to get a response. Anything else for the policy board? Mr. Chairman, anything else? All right. This policy board stands adjourned. We'll have American Yield Management Board in here at 8 a.m. Thank you all.